Teleportation will commence in 5 minutes. Do not leave any luggage unattended. Unattended luggage will be removed and destroyed. Attention, ladies and gentlemen. This is an announcement from planet X31. Please take your seats.
Columbia, this is Houston, ALS, over.
The exercise to test the reactions of troops to atom bombs used in support of an attack.
97 with different degrees.
Lower right!
Greetings, planet Earth, and welcome to D Science and Cocktails. Science and Cocktails is an initiative taken in cooperation with the Niels Bohr Institute, and its purpose is to bring first-class scientific information directly to you, Earthlings, without interference of any other sort, type of intermediate media. Its aim is to make the flow of thoughts and the flow of sensorial perception as smooth as the flow of a cocktail mix. Susan Blackmore is a freelance writer, broadcaster, and lecturer, as well as a visiting professor at the University of Plymouth. She has flown all the way from England to Copenhagen just to be here. Tonight, Susan Blackmore will teleport you into the deep universe of your own mind. She will digress over the topic of free will. She will try to argue that you are in fact nothing more than a moment, and she's absolutely right. Move to the right. Move to the right. Move to the left. Move to the left.
Ladies and gentlemen, the words of Susan Blackmore will be transcribed into colors and shape by the artist Henrik Schutze, and they will be followed by the amazing electronics of Karsten Flum and Sophus Forsberg, two of the most creative electronic musicians in Denmark.
End of transmission. A big applause to Susan Blackmore. Clap, 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 clap.
You are puppets. You go quiet when I tell you. I'm very glad I ended up here. In this country where people are willing to make... Yeah, shut up, you lot in the back! I can't hear myself think. Yes! A country where you are willing to make pictures of Muhammad. Yes. And a place where I can come and stay in a commune in the free town of Christiania. It's fantastic. So thank you. But how did you all get here? Did you come here of your own free will? In other words, did you consciously think, shall I go there or not, and make the decision with your conscious mind, and then your mind made you come here? Or did you come here because the whole universe conspired through the mechanisms of biology, chemistry, physics, and everything else to bring this particular body here at this time? I want a show of hands, please. You've only got two choices, and I want to see every hand up, please. Who came here of their own free will? Whew! Lots of you. Who just ended up here because they ended up here? Excellent. It looks about half and half to me. Right. We have a battle. You're absolutely right, whoever said that. We have a battle. So the questions that I'm going to raise today are some of the biggest questions that maybe some of you have been asking all your life, like I have. What's the meaning of it all? Who am I? Why am I here? What's the point of it? What should I do? All those kind of big questions. And they used to be purely philosophical questions, but it's wonderful in the last 10, 15 years that neuroscience is beginning to, maybe 20 years, neuroscience is really beginning to address these questions as well. I'm going to suggest that the self that seems so important to me, my consciousness that seems so real, the free will that I used to feel I have, they are all illusions. This is a very simple illusion you can see here. Can you all see this? What can you see in that that's illusory? Depth, yeah, okay. You can see depth. What else? Why are you laughing? Is there some joke in there that I've missed? What else can you see apart from depth? You know it's flat and black and white, don't you? So what else can you see? Lines? Well, there are some lines, yeah. Someone has a problem. No, probably you meant some other lines that aren't really there, but anything else you can see? Vibrating, yeah, hyperspace, fine, yeah. I should have known there'd be a weird audience here. Can anyone see colors? Yeah, can anyone see moving patterns? No? I can. I mean, I would if I looked. I don't dare look. It makes me go very funny. But the point about this illusion is there's something there, but we're kind of deluded about what it is. But it doesn't bother us. we're quite happy with this kind of illusion. We're quite happy to think that our eyes play tricks on us, or the visual cortex in our brain plays tricks on us. I'm going to be talking about slightly more difficult illusions. But I want to be clear what I mean by illusion. When I say something is an illusion, I don't mean it doesn't exist. I mean, well, go in the dictionary and look up what illusion means. It means a false impression or something. This sound is a bit weird, isn't it? Does it sound weird? No. Is it okay?
Pull it sideways a bit.
Pull it sideways a bit.
That's better.
Like that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that all right? Okay. It's something that deceives us. Something we think it's not how it seems. So when I'm saying things are an illusion, when I say free will is an illusion, I mean it's not what it seems to be. Or if I say consciousness is an illusion, it's not, there's nothing there. I'm not saying there's no problem, there's no difficulty, just we are deluded about ourselves. So I hope to make you realize how deluded you are. So if I'm saying these things are not as they seem to be, let's start with yourself. How does yourself seem to be? I want you please just to sit there quietly and feel, what is it like to be me? Obviously, it's very funny being some people. Shh. Okay, be yourself. Okay, you're quite familiar with what it's like to be yourself. But what is it really like? Do you seem to be, for example, unified, some complete unity? Do you seem to be something that continues? If you think about how you walked here, how you came into this building, is that the same you? You think, yeah, it's the same me. Do you feel that you are the one who experiences your experiences? The one who decides what to do? The one who decided to come here? Is that how it seems? Maybe you might argue with some of these things, but typically that's how we think about the self. Does it feel a bit like this? Yes, some of you are nodding and saying yes. Do you feel as though somehow there's a body and I'm inside the body? Does it feel like that? Our language thing, I mean, this is my foot, right? It's not me. I'm up here, sort of looking at my foot. That's my foot over there. That's my hand. So I am not the, we talk like that, don't we? And then we say, this is my brain. That's a bit harder. But these are the kinds of ways we think about ourselves. Or perhaps, does it feel like this? Well, I know that there isn't an armchair inside your head, and there aren't levers. But does it sometimes feel as though you're sitting somewhere in your head and you have to decide to do something? Let's all do something of our own free will, okay? I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. And when I say that, I want all of you to, you mustn't hurt anybody else, okay? Rules of Christiania. But you can do anything you like, okay? 1, 2, 3, go. Good. Okay. Remember what you did of your own free will. So there you are, somehow in your head, sitting in the armchair, pulling the levers, arms, legs, that kind of thing, making it happen. This is, I submit, how it often feels. There's me, and there's the things I do, and the experiences I have. Well, this is what the American philosopher Dan Dennett has called the Cartesian theater. This place inside the brain where the experiences happen, where the information comes in through the senses, ends up in the middle, and here I sit, and I make the decisions what to do. Well, it cannot be that way. He says, this is in his famous book, Consciousness Explained, in 1991, the whole book really is a kind of demolition of this natural idea of this inner theatre. He calls it Cartesian because of Descartes. And Descartes, as I'm sure you know, really believed there were two kinds of things in the world, mind and matter, or subjective and objective. And the huge problem that we have in science, in the science of consciousness, is dualism. How on earth can a physical brain be responsible for how it feels to be me sitting here in the cinema? This is a real mystery. But to get out of the mystery, you can't think of the Cartesian theatre. He says, when you discard Cartesian dualism, I mean, everybody discards Cartesian dualism with about 2 people in the world who don't. Because the idea of these two things, they can't interact, they can't, it doesn't make sense. But what he's saying is all the scientists and philosophers throw out Cartesian dualism, but they hang on to this idea of the theatre inside the mind. But he says, when you throw out Cartesian dualism, you really must throw out the show that would have gone on in the Cartesian theatre and the audience, because neither the audience nor the show can be found in the brain, and the brain is the only place there is to look for them. So we have a problem. Our intuition makes us feel that way, but it can't be that way. I'm not just going on one philosopher saying this. Let's just look at a picture of a brain. It doesn't really matter the details of all these places, except to say that as neuroscience develops, it does sound funny. Does it sound all right? Thank you. It keeps going loud and quiet for me, I'm sorry. Might be my ears. If you look at what we know about the brain, you can map all these different areas. Later on, I'll talk about some specific things that happen in specific places. But the main point I want to make is this is not a system with a middle and information coming into the middle where I am sitting and going out to the muscles to make me act. This is a massive parallel machine. Masses and masses of different parallel pathways going in every direction. You've got stuff coming in through the eyes, through the ears, through the skin, from the muscles. It's all coming in different places, going to different places, different decisions being made all over the place. The picture that you feel as if you're seeing now, there's nowhere in the brain that corresponds to a complete picture. If there were, there'd have to be another little person in there with an eye to look at it, and so on, and so on, and so on. There's lots of different things. Here, in the visual cortex, which we know a huge amount about, I mean, we'll look back in 20 years and go, they knew nothing. But still, we know a lot. There are something like 40 parallel pathways going on here, doing different jobs, analyzing shapes, analyzing objects, color, movement, a separate system controlling eye movements, another system coordinating fast reactions. All these things are going on at once. They don't ever come together in a place in the middle where I would be having the experiences, or where I would say, I've seen this now, I'm going to do that. It's a problem. So, who am I then? This ghost in the machine. To put it very crudely, we could say there are 2 major types of theory about who or what I am. The philosopher Derek Parfit has divided them up into 2 types: ego theory and bundle theory, after David Hume's idea about bundles. So the ego theorist thinks it's really true. I am me. This me? Yes, it's me. I am a continuing entity. I have the experiences. When I see the color of your hand there, I'm over here, I'm having the experience. When I decide to stamp on the floor, that's me doing it. And it's the same me that saw that color over there. The bundle theorist says, rubbish. Brain doesn't work that way. World doesn't work that way. There is no continuous inner self. There's just a bundle of experiences and decisions and actions tied together by the continuity of a physical brain and the memories and so on. But there's nobody in there. The lights are on, but there's nobody home. So again, I'm going to give you two choices, ego theory or bundle theory. Who is an ego theorist? And who is a bundle theorist? Whoa. And who didn't put their hand up? Loads of you. Well, there are many good reasons why you might not put your hand up, but I'm not going to delve into them. One thing I found in many years of teaching courses on consciousness is that my students would start out as ego theorists, and then a strange thing would happen. They'd say, intellectually, I'm a bundle theorist, but in my heart, I'm an ego theorist. Help! What do I do? And then I have to soothe them and say, there, it's all right. This dichotomy plays itself out again and again in the history of the world. On the one side, you have many religions, in particular Christianity and Islam, but many others, that depend absolutely on the idea that there is a self. It's not just a brain process or some other continuing thing in a brain in a physical world. It's something completely different. It's a spirit or a soul. And it was given to you by God and implanted into you. Well, that's a problem, actually. They don't know whether it was at conception or a bit later or at birth, but never mind it. He put it in there anyway. And this is the thing that later on will go off to heaven or hell and take the punishment or the glory of being a good person. And those religions depend very heavily on that idea. Not all religions are like that. Derek Parfit, who crudely divided things into ego and bundle theories, says the Buddha was the first bundle theorist. So you don't need to know about brains to come to this conclusion. The Buddha came to this conclusion by sitting under a tree. Well, first of all, he tried every kind of asceticism, starving himself, praying to Hindu kind of gods, and undergoing all kinds of arduous ceremonies, and decided it was all rubbish, and sat down under a tree and decided he wasn't going to get up till he knew the answer. Not many people dare do that. Anyway, he did, and he found the answer, which he said was this, among other things. This bundle of elements, of course this is a translation, but this bundle of elements is void of self. In it there is no sentient being. Just as a set of wooden parts receives the name of carriage, so do we give to elements the name of fancied being. He talked about a carriage. You might think about my car. I have a very old green Ford Focus, and there's bits falling off the front where the plastic goes round. We rip them off because they're all bent, and it's had to have a new exhaust and a new, I don't know, whatever else. But it's still my car. Why is it my car? Not because there's some actual carness about it, but just it's a bunch of things and you can replace bits. In fact, you could probably replace everything in turn and it would still be my car. It won't last much longer, but until it goes to the great scrapyard in the sky, it's my car. So the Buddha said we're like this. We're just a bunch of stuff stuck together, and we give it a name, Su. And it's fancied being. And that was more than 2,000 years ago. So, those are your choices, to put it very crudely. So, I already asked you that, so we'll forget that. We can move on now to the tricky question of free will. I started with self because the way we feel about free will is that I did it. You remember your action? Perhaps you'd like to do it again. 1, 2, 3, go! Oh, very good. I think that you didn't do that last time. It's a new one. Whoa, that's really free will. Did anybody decide they're not going to do anything of their own free will? Yeah, good. There's always one. Said to be the most ever talked about philosophical problem. And you can see why. Why? Because of this powerful sense we have that I'm in here and I'm deciding. So, argued about endlessly, here are just two examples. Samuel Johnson, who says, all theory is against the freedom of the will. All experience is for it. Summing up that problem. And then just ordinary people come along, as in his biographer. So we know our will is free, and there's an end on it. And you have plenty of neuroscientists who say very similar things today. Of course, we got free will, end of story. But it gets more and more difficult. We have the same dichotomy we had before in the religions. So, in Christianity, God gave you free will. It's one of the answers to the problem of suffering. Why is there such terrible suffering in the world? Because God gave you free will to decide to do good and evil. And therefore, there's a point in having heaven and hell where we go afterwards. And again, Buddhism doesn't have any of that stuff. This is my all-time favorite quote from Buddhist scriptures, which is, actions exist and also their consequences, but the person that acts does not. It's a very profound thought. So when I go like this, there are consequences. I was hoping the floor would give way and I'd go straight through. There are consequences to the actions of a body, but not because there's somebody in there. They're just the consequences of an interconnected universe in which, in Buddhism, it's described as codependent arising. Everything that happens is because of what happened before. This is radically different from the view of Christianity and Islam.
Another consequence for us was better sound, because you sound better in the middle.
But then you can't. Oh, it's because I'm going close to that. Oh, what if I stay over here? Is that better? Way. Because if I go here, presumably you can't see the writing. Is that right? Yeah, okay. See, you're manipulating me, aren't you? Hey, it's much better over here. I can just go like that. Ta-da! I think I need a drink. Cheers. Wonderful, dark and strong. What is it? Is that right?
Black hole.
Dark and strong? Stormy, dark and stormy. Thank you. Dark and stormy. Okay. I don't know why I got this piece of newspaper here. I don't think I want it. Did you see that? Did you see what happened? This lady here with the thing round her head went, oh, like that. Now, why did she do that? She did it very fast. Now, you might think that she did this for the following reason. She is a conscious being. She sat there. Oh, she's looking terrified. It wasn't a bomb. It was a piece of newspaper. She was sitting there. You might think she's sitting there consciously looking at me. She consciously saw a ball of newspaper coming towards her and very quickly thought, oh, it might hit me. I better move. And moved. Right? That is not what happened. We know precisely that it's not what happened. Here in the visual system, oh, wrong. I'm getting in a muddle here. There is a button that, yes. Okay, this is the primary visual cortex. The information comes in through the eyes along here, goes up into the thalamus inside here. Various different paths go this way. Some information goes out here towards eye movement control. Most of it ends up in several pathways in V1 in here. But then it divides into two major pathways. There are lots of others, but the two main ones, the dorsal stream up here and the ventral stream coming down here. Now, this dorsal stream, the information goes very fast. Up here, you've got a strip called the motor cortex, which controls movements like this. This information went very, very quickly up to the motor cortex, and in very few synapses coordinated this movement. rather slowly, taking much more time and doing a much more difficult job. Some of the same information got sent this way, down the ventral stream, into the parietal lobe, into the temporal lobe, sorry. And here, the processes that involve object recognition take place. So sometime after she's gone like this, there would be the recognition that it was a piece of paper coming towards her. Simple. We can see it happening with brain scanners and whatever. But it's not how it seems to be, is it? We think we did it deliberately. But it's obvious when you think about, we play ping pong sometimes. Not that fast, but you know, quite fast. Faster than you can actually see that it's a ball, or see, you know, it just goes too fast. Tennis players, really good ones, the same. These fast things are coordinated much more quickly than the brain can work out that that's a ping pong bat or a piece of newspaper. Now, that's a very simple example, but I'm going to give you a couple more examples of things we know about actions that we do. So let's do something really, really simple. What I want you to do this time, and again, you mustn't hurt anybody else or tickle the person in front of you. I want you to hold out your hand in front of you like this, and then whenever you feel like it, of your own free will, just flip your hand. Now, I want you to do that lots of times. I'm going to give you some time. Get the feeling of deciding when to do it, and then doing it.
Open eyes?
It doesn't matter whether your eyes are open or closed, actually. Might be easier closed, I don't know. But you've got to do the hand thing. He can't close his eyes and move his hand at the same time. Oh, no. Too difficult. Okay, just get the feel of it. Right, I want to ask you a question. What decided the time at which you moved? The music in your head. Okay, that's an interesting example. So he's got music going in his head, and then he's going dun 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 dun. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
At first I did like you did, like I did
You copied me.
thinking thing,
Yeah.
like this or waving thing. And what happened was that I thought, well, I'm not considering every movement, so I'm not deciding this. It's
Right.
just a movement I started.
Right.
So then I thought I better wait and see when will I decide to move it the next time, and it became like intervals of a second.
And it became like what?
Like intervals of a second.
Aha, okay, okay. So that's quite a complicated answer. Any more answers? I see what you mean, though. It's fine. Any other answers? Yes? The premotor cortex. Okay, so this woman here knows that there's a premotor cortex. The brain's gone now. Near the motor cortex, where events are coordinated, muscle movements and so on are planned in advance. And so she thinks that the first thing that started the movement off was some activity in the premotor cortex, presumably caused by other things in the brain, like me talking and so on. Okay, any other ideas? You said, well, what made you go one? It didn't go when you said go. Excellent. Yep. Any more good ideas? Yeah.
I did it with my will. My will.
Your will. Okay.
My will.
She used her free will. Okay, she willed it. Yep. Any other ideas?
A recognition, if it was an expression or a repetition.
A recognition. What?
A recognition, if it was an expression or a repetition.
Yeah, okay. I'm a bit confused, but go on. I mean, what I'm trying to get at is how you feel about what happened. And I suppose, yeah. You couldn't stand waiting anymore. Who couldn't stand waiting anymore? Was that me? Okay, so his self, whatever that is, couldn't stand waiting anymore. All right? Any other ideas? Yeah. After a while, it's kind of odd, isn't it? At the beginning, the first ones, you think, I'm going to do it now. And then later on, you're thinking, hang on a minute. Yeah, I agree with you. Let's stick with the first ones for the moment. Any other ideas before I move on? Yes, one more.
I closed my eyes and then I was just trying to feel when it wanted to move and it didn't want to.
He closed his eyes. It's really, this is the guy who managed to close his eyes and move his hand. Yay! Oh, it didn't work, of course. No, sorry, he didn't manage it. He decided he would decide, but nothing happened. Okay, right. Well, you've got lots and lots of ideas here, but you can imagine that in a simplistic way, you might think, like the woman here said, that something in the brain starts it off, and then I think I'm going to move, and I move. Or you might think there really is free will, that it's something to do with my conscious self, and I consciously decided to move, and so my mind or my consciousness or myself started it off. Now, in the very famous experiment by Ben Libet, this is exactly the question that he asked, and this was exactly the movement that he used to test it. And he called the time of the decision to move W for the moment of will, and the time of movement, M. And then he also wanted to know when the activity was starting in the motor cortex. In fact, not premotor cortex, but motor cortex, a bit later. And what you can see when you have a deliberate action, this is we're using electroencephalogram on the scalp. It's not clever brain scans. This is many years ago, back in 1985, he did this. So he put electrodes on the scalp of all his subjects, and he asked them to sit in a room and about 40 times to do this movement. And he wanted to find out whether the will came first or the brain activity came first. And he measured what's called the readiness potential in the motor cortex. The readiness potential, if you see a graph of it, it's a kind of ramp effect. It's like, and then it gradually goes up like this, and then just before the action, it goes down. And that can be measured by averaging 40 measurements. So, the big question. Now, this was very important to Libet, because he was a dualist. He's died now. He was a dualist, and he absolutely believed that the mind controls the body. Note this, if any of you are into alternative therapies and wood stuff, you hear all the time about mind over matter. Well, if you think there's such a thing as mind over matter, then you must think that mind and matter are separate things. So you're a dualist, which has all sorts of problems, which I hope will hurt your head a lot this evening. That's not to dismiss all of those things, just this phrase, you know, the mind over matter, the separation of these things. Anyway, Libet, for him, it was very important. He was going to prove to all these skeptical materialist scientists that there is mind over matter, that free will operates by the process of my consciousness starting off the process and causing the brain to act. So he could measure which happened first. Now, before I go any further, I want to know what you think. If we divide all these reasons into two, does the activity in the motor cortex, or the premotor cortex, if you prefer, come first? Or does the conscious decision to move come first? Hands up if you think the brain activity comes first. Hands up if you think the conscious decision to move comes first. Oh, very few. Yes?
More details, I didn't understand.
Okay, well, I'll come into more details in a minute. All right, I'll ask you all again in a minute, because most of you didn't put your hand up. So, let me explain how he did the experiment. It's easy enough to measure what's going on in the cortex. It's much more difficult to measure when you decide to move. How could we possibly measure when I decided to do this? When the decision happened? Any ideas? Pardon? Well, we can measure the action, but we want presumably the decision to move comes before the action. So how do we measure when it happened? If you're measuring the brain activity, that's the other thing that we want. He wants to be able to compare the time of the brain activity with the time of the conscious experience of wanting to move. Well, if you're measuring the brain, you're on the other side. He wants to know, does the brain start first or do I start first? There's no way to measure it, says a very confident voice in the front. Look at a clock, yes. Yes, he's right, he's right. It's a very interesting problem, and it's because I think these experiments are so famous because Libet solved the problem of measuring the time of the decision to move, which is very tricky indeed, to measure the time when you consciously decide to move. I should say these experiments have been argued over ever since. There are thousands and thousands of academic papers on this one experiment and several whole books about it, and they're still being written. So, you know, this is big time in consciousness studies. So how he did it was as follows. Had a clock with a spot moving around like this. So let's say it's 12 o'clock, 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, okay? And he asked the subjects, at the moment they decided to move, to say where the spot was. This is very clever, because they don't have to say straight away 3 or 6. Doesn't matter how long they take to say it. The point is they're deciding where the spot was when they decided to move. So I want you all to do it for me, please. I want you to hold out your hand again, and whenever you feel like it, of your own free will, do this. And I want you to shout out where the clock was when you decided to move, okay? I want everybody to do it, please. So I'm starting at 12 o'clock. Right, you can go now. Come on, everybody, join in. Okay, stop. Good. Well, you've proved one thing. There are lots and lots of arguments about this, and many people who said it's not possible to do it. It's easy to do it. I've done it lots of times, and now you've done it. It's much harder to know exactly what you're doing. But anyway, all you're making is a judgment about simultaneity of the moment you decided to move and where the spot was. Lots of subsidiary experiments have been done to prove that you can do that accurately, extremely accurately. So now we have two measures. We have the moment of the will to move with the spot, and we have the time of the start of the readiness potential from the electrodes, and we have the time of the action from reading out muscles in the wrist when it moved. So which comes first? Now perhaps I've made it clearer. Whoever said they didn't understand it, a bit clearer, not very. Okay. He's reasonably happy. So I want you to decide what you think the timing is. Obviously the action comes last. Which comes first? The start of the brain activity in motor cortex or the time when you decide you want to move? Hands up who thinks the will to move comes first. Yep, hands up. Hands up who think the brain starts first. And hands up who didn't put their hands up already. Cowards. Okay. Well, I can see you're a very sophisticated audience because most of you are right. If you take the action to be at time 0, the will, the moment when you'd said when the spot was, when you decided to move, is about 200 milliseconds, a fifth of a second before, and the brain has already started its readiness potential half a second before. In other words, your decision to move comes way after the brain is getting ready to move.
But the time when you say the time when you...
Yeah, she's saying the time that you said, yeah?
You have to articulate.
You have to articulate it. And the time it takes you to say that is as long as that. But it doesn't matter. Because if I go, and I did it at 3, I can go 3. It doesn't matter when I say 3. I'm making a judgment that it happened when the spot was there. So that's not a problem. Yeah, but the action, you're not timing the action. You're timing the simultaneity of where the spot is. You look puzzled. I'll have a go at explaining it to you later if you like. Right. There have been many experiments. This was 1985, caused a huge furore. But it should not have caused any furore, because any scientist who thinks about how the brain works ought to immediately say, of course, the brain action starts first. Of course, my feeling of having free will and acting is a brain product that comes later. But the feeling that I have free will is so strong that they've been arguing about it ever since. It's now been done with brain scanners, with PET scans, with fMRI, and with all kinds of other apparatus. A much more recent experiment in 2008 has gone back further than premotor cortex into basal ganglia, into other areas of the brain that are responsible. And this is just one example of many experiments in which the conclusion was that the outcome of a decision can be encoded in brain activity in prefrontal and parietal cortex up to 10 seconds before it enters awareness. The whole concept of entering awareness is dodgy, but never mind, that's another story. But in these experiments, the scientists got people to press either left hand or right hand buttons, and they were able to predict which hand they would choose up to 10 seconds before the people made up their mind. I don't know what we conclude from this, really. This is just some of the pathways involved right down here in the middle of the brain, the basal ganglia. When you're thinking about whether you want to go to a lecture tomorrow, there's probably stuff going on all over the place. Takes a long time, and then it gets faster and faster and comes up here to the premotor cortex, primary motor cortex here, and you get the readiness potentials in here, and you move your fingers. So all these things are being mapped out now. And you think about how many decisions are going on probably in your mind now. I mean, you're probably thinking about, it must be nearly the end of this, shall I run to the bar quickly? I mean, she's going to shut up yet? And after I get home, am I going to, you know? All this is going on in all of these bits here. And we're just going to learn more and more. So what's left for me? Well, to me, I think I'm going to have to leave out Dan Wigner's experiments with Ouija boards, but he's one of the scientists working on these issues, and he came to the conclusion that this is the way that it works. I'm sure any of you, how many of you are scientists? Quite a lot. So one of the fundamental things you've learnt in science is that you should never assume that a correlation is a cause. When you find a correlation between two events, you mustn't assume this one caused that one. It might be that one caused this one, or something else caused them both. So Wigner's theory is very straightforward. What happens all the time in our lives is we have a thought. I'm going to go to Christiania. And then we find ourselves going there. And we think the thought caused the action. But it didn't. Something else, all these other stuff going on in the brain caused it. And so he concludes, our sense of being a conscious agent who does things comes at the cost of being technically wrong all the time. So, do some of you suspect, like me, that free will is an illusion? Yes, good. I mean, we might be wrong, but at least I think we should have the suspicion and worry about it. So what are we going to do about it then? I have spent my lifetime, really, trying to throw off the illusion. When I was a kid, I thought about it. Certainly when I was a teenager, and I think by the time I was at university, I was really working hard to get rid of the illusion. And I don't really get it anymore. It just doesn't bother me. But it took quite a lot of work. And it seems that most people don't react that way. So before I finish, I just want to tell you a little bit about how other people seem to react. I wrote a book, many years ago now, in which I interviewed people. It was called Conversations on Consciousness. And I interviewed some of the world's top scientists, neuroscientists and philosophers about their work. And one of the questions I asked them all was, do you have free will? And they really divided into three types. The type, they worry about free will, they ignore the feeling and hope it'll go away. Or they just say, well, it's impossible to live without free will, of course. I'm going to ignore it. Or they say, well, of course, you know, it may be illusory, but I still got to act as if I've got free will, because the world would fall apart and the legal system would collapse, and, you know, the world would become chaos, and so we can't do it. Or there's people who stop believing it. And there are many of them. Interestingly, Kevin O'Regan, a well-known visual scientist, he believes that he's a robot. He's thought that since he was 4 years old. But he says, yes, everybody believes in it. Even robots believe they have free will, even if they don't. John Searle, a very famous American philosopher. They're so certain, some of these people. Well, I don't have a choice about that. We all think we have free will, and there's no way we can think away our own free will. Or put another way, we cannot get rid of the conviction that we're free, even if we become philosophically convinced that the conviction is wrong. So there. What convinces him is completely unconvincing to me. He says, when I go in a restaurant and I look at the menu, I might decide, well, I'll have the spaghetti. But I'm not forced to have the spaghetti. I could have done something else. But that's not the question. Because could he have done something else given the state of his brain and the state of the menu? That's a more difficult question. But this spaghetti business has gone around in philosophy for a long time. And this is Susan Greenfield, with whom people sometimes confuse me, so don't confuse me, please, with her. She says, I believe very much in my own free will. And she says, I can see that you might be in your Sue Blackmore way, sitting there and saying, I wonder what she's going to order. But I don't think that every minute of your life you think, I wonder what she's going to do. Well, you might if you had schizophrenia. Well, she's wrong, I do. I do go around thinking that. And here's a good example. Yesterday, I found myself, as one does, in the botanical garden. I didn't get there of my own free will. Decisions happened, and there I was. And I was walking along and thinking, I really ought to leave because I promised to meet my husband Adam at the Tivoli Gardens, which was shut, at 2:45, and I'll be late if I don't go now, so I better turn right and go out of the door. And then I saw this lovely staircase here, and it looked so inviting, and I thought, ooh, have I got time to go up the staircase into the top, or have I got to go now? And I thought, oh, that would make an interesting example to talk about in my lecture tomorrow. I could say blah, 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 and I looked and I was already halfway up the stairs. That's how it works. You just find yourself doing things. And of course, it was lovely up there. And it was tempting then to think, I made the right decision. It's lovely up here. But I didn't. The thoughts came along saying, it's very nice up here. How lucky I am to be here. Now I really must go. Run. And I was late. But he wasn't cross. He's very kind. Dan Wegner also believes you can't get rid of the illusion. He does the as if. And he says, I think almost everybody who's happy and healthy does that. So I'm obviously not happy and healthy. What? Almost. Oh, thank you. It's okay then. We can. But I really do think it's possible to give it up. Sometimes I feel that I'm alone in trying to give up the illusion. But actually, I'm not. There have, for thousands of years, been people trying to give it up. Very often through meditating and asking questions like, who's meditating? Is anyone meditating? Is it possible to not meditate while sitting there? And such Zen-type questions. V.S. Ramachandran, some of you neuroscientists over there will know about him. And when I asked him, do you have free will? He said loads of stuff about brains. And I said, come on, about you, come on, and get him out of the brain stuff. And he said, it's a bit like the dance of Shiva. You think you're an aloof spectator watching the universe, but really you're just part of the cosmic ebb and flow. And that's ennobling rather than diminishing. So I found one person there. But it runs throughout Zen, and I've mentioned Buddhism before. The classic book, The Way of Zen, by Alan Watts, he says, we just decide without having the faintest understanding of how we do it. Decisions just happen like hiccups inside me or like a bird singing outside me. And that's the way of Zen. To be concentrating fully and aware in every moment and not acting, not doing. It's possible. Now, I am not trying to persuade you that this is the right thing to do. But I do hope that I have made your head hurt horribly. And I will leave you with a question. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I believe we have some questions.
Yes, there's time for questions. So thanks a lot, Sue. And will you have to help me a little bit with this?